The Planning Commission approval of TSM 13-87 and TSM 13-88, and adopt a resolution granting the appeal of the Tres Pinos Water District. And so before I call on staff to come up, I know that the attorney representing, I believe, the applicant has requested a continuance on this matter. So I wanted to invite him up to the podium, and he could explain to the board why they're requesting the continuance. And then at that time, if staff wants, has any questions about the continuance, and then I'll ask the board, and we'll vote on whether to grant this continuance or not. Mr. Ravella, how are you?
Good afternoon, Chairman. Thank you. I apologize to the department that we cut in front of the line. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. And yes, we have requested a continuance of this matter. We became aware of the proposed findings in the resolution late last week and have briefly had the opportunity to go over it. We would appreciate a continuance of this matter to the second meeting in March, which falls within the 60-day deadline that this board has to conclude a public hearing on an appeal. In order to have the opportunity to meet with staff and members of your board, if possible, and stakeholders, potentially the appellant, to address the concerns raised in the proposed resolution. Also, I noticed that one of the last findings in the resolution deals with the applicant being eligible to resubmit a proposed project that addresses various concerns raised in the draft resolution, and so we'd like the opportunity to go over that with staff and items in the record to address those. And so that's the reason why we've requested the continuance here today, and we'd appreciate the board's consideration of that request. And I can answer any questions if necessary.
Are there any questions of Mr. Ravella from the board? No? Thank you, Paul.
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Sure.
would it be appropriate to ask the appellant if they have comments about this being continued?
Sure, absolutely. Where's the appellant? Oh, there. There they are. Ms. Breen?
Good afternoon to the board. Christine Breen appearing on behalf of the Tres Pinos Water District. I have received the appellant's request for continuance. I understand that it is within your purview to entertain and grant the continuance if necessary. In reviewing the proposed resolution before you, I note that there's not just one deficiency that the resolution has identified, but there are actually several, and those are significant. They identify the noncompliance with either the former or the current general plan. And my reservation about granting the continuance is that due to the significance and the extent of the deficiencies identified, they don't strike me as ones that are amenable to a quick fix or something that could be negotiated. The only other comment I would make about the request is that, as my client has previously advised this board, we are in the midst of a long-term wastewater management plan. We don't anticipate having results from that until possibly third quarter of this year. And so we, as a district, would not be in a position to make any commitment to a proposal until such time as those results had been received and we knew exactly what we were dealing with. So other than that, I have nothing else to add, unless anyone has any questions for me.
Are there any questions of Ms. Breen?
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I would like to make a motion at this time.
Okay.
To go ahead and continue the public hearing as requested.
Okay.
Well,
prior to a motion, I did want to grant Supervisor Muenzer, he is the supervisor of that district, an opportunity to weigh his his opinion on a continuance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am good, especially after hearing the appellant saying that there are some deficiencies in the request to go forward with this hearing today.
Go forward with the hearing. Okay.
You might, Chair, there might be other public comment.
Sure, and I'll open it up. Are there any other comments from members of the board or questions? Okay, so at this time, since we did have the applicant and the appellant up, I will open up to the public for comment on this item. Are there any speaker cards? No speaker cards? Okay.
It's just a question, a clarification. Will there be
This is a
another
vote for
opportunity?
the continuance,
Okay.
and then if we do proceed, then yeah.
I appreciate that.
No problem. Okay, there's no question on the continuance. I will certainly poll the board to see if if there is the support for to have this meeting be continued to March.
Yeah, and I started to make the motion, Mr.
That
Chair.
you're in
so
favor
I
of it?
will, I will be in favor
Okay,
of that.
I'll
Supervisor?
second the motion, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Jerry, are you
Okay,
in favor of continuance or not?
I'm a little confused. Is this an official motion, or you
Not an
just
official
poll-
motion. I just want
you're
to
just polling?
poll the board, yes.
Then I am for going forward.
And Supervisor,
I want to hear the. I'm against the continuance.
okay. And I as well, I will defer to Supervisor Muenzer because it is his district, and so I'm okay with moving forward. So we'll go ahead and hear the appeal. Okay? All right. So moving forward, on the appeal, staff, is there, if you want to direct us on how we proceed, 'cause I know that this is a continuance from the previous meeting that we had in February, right?
Yes,
Or was it
yes.
in January, I believe?
January, I believe.
Right.
I would just, since it's a public hearing, I would ask that whether anybody else wanted to speak on the public hearing, then the board can consider the proposed resolution that's before it, that's been drafted by staff.
Okay.
We
Fair
don't have a
enough.
formal presentation besides just the proposed resolution. If there's any
Fine.
corrections or changes to it, we're happy to make that.
Fair enough. And so with that, I would like to invite up the applicant if they do have any other some comments, especially on what's being proposed in the resolution.
Mr. Chair, for clarification, I'm a little confused. I was was consenting to continue the public hearing. Is that what we're doing? To continue
So
to a
there's-
later date?
No.
So there was 3 supervisors that agreed to move forward with the item and to consider what's before us, which is this resolution. That's why I pulled the board. And
All right, so then maybe my position was misunderstood. What I was trying to do was to agree with the.
No, I understand that.
You did, okay, I
did.
wanted to
And
make
so,
sure.
And that's why I didn't entertain a motion because it didn't have the support.
Okay, got it. All right, wanted to make sure that was clear
Right,
because
Counsel.
I wasn't clear. I wasn't sure. Thank you.
So the decision that the board has made is to go forward and finalize the appeal today.
Today, okay.
Finalize the
very
bill
good.
and adopt the resolution.
Okay.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to address you here today again. The clerk is handing you a letter that I stayed up fairly late last night drafting in anticipation of the possibility that our request for a continuance would be denied. Essentially, the board has to make several required findings to deny an application for a tentative map. Those findings are listed in the San Benito County Code 2307006E. There are 9 items. Several of them apply to inconsistency with the general plan, physical suitability of the type of development proposed, the design or the proposed improvements are likely to cause substantial environmental damage. The design of the subdivision is a type likely to cause serious public health problems. The design will conflict with easements. The land is subject to a Williamson Act contract. And the last one being that the discharge of waste from the proposed subdivision would result in a violation. Now, the board simply cannot just make these findings unsubstantiated under phrasing in a proposed resolution. These findings, according to the Vineyard Area Citizens Case versus City of Rancho Cordova in 2007, must be based on substantial evidence. Substantial evidence is defined as facts, reasonable assumptions predicated upon facts, and expert opinion supported by facts. Under the California Public Resources Code, substantial evidence is made up of facts, reasonable assumptions predicated on facts, and expert opinions. Under the same sections of the California Public Resources Code, the following are not substantial evidence: argument, speculation, unsubstantiated opinion, inaccurate or erroneous evidence, evidence that is not credible. Testimony from biased witnesses or testimony that is inherently improbable is not credible and therefore cannot be considered substantial evidence. As an example, a neighbor's testimony regarding technical scientific issues is not substantial evidence when the neighbor has no expertise to comment on such issues, and that's from the Bowman versus the City of Berkeley case. In short, there is no substantial evidence in the record to support any of the findings in the resolution. In fact, the bulk of the evidence in the record, which dates back 2.5 years, supports the contrary position. With regard to the general plan consistency, this proposed resolution is the first instance where it has been determined that the project is inconsistent with the general plan. Rincon Consultants, the county's consultants, staff, on more than one occasion have determined that this project is consistent with the general plan. Now, for purposes of consistency, it doesn't have to meet every single goal, every single policy, every single action item. The project has to be in harmony. In the resolution, there have been 2 elements allegedly that this project is inconsistent with. Policy number 10, which deals with expansion of a public utility service district, and policy number 15, which states that the majority of development with a density greater than 2 units per acre shall occur within the cities of San Juan Bautista, Hollister, and the Piscinas Ranch Resort site. Now, there's 38 other policies in the applicable general plan, and it's presumed that silence on those policies reflects consistency. So 38 out of 40 policies this project is consistent with. And even of the 2 that are identified, there's no evidence that this project is inconsistent. There have been no recommendations from the district's own engineers that the system, wastewater treatment and water service, needs to be expanded. In fact, San Benito Engineers concludes that the board should consider allowing a limited number of new connections in their moratorium analysis from 2008, page 5. In fact, I think they also concluded, and I quote, "The water district has a surplus of water and the ability to handle additional flow in the sewer treatment ponds." With regard to expansion for purposes of service of this project, that's all covered under ordinances 4 and 5 of the district. The applicant essentially has to pay for those expansion costs. That's part of their fees for applying for connection to the system. So there is a financial mechanism, and the plans for expansion were provided to the county at the time of the application. Matt Kelly Engineering provided plans for proposed locations of pipelines, mains, hydrants. Those are all included in the plans that are included in the record. The Wallace Group, most recently, including in their letter from Stephen Tanaka dated December 10th, 2015, found that that there is capacity in both the water and wastewater treatment system, and San Benito Engineering also concluded that there's room for an additional 90 connections. So there's no evidence, much less substantial evidence, to support the fact that the project is not consistent with land use policy number 10 for adequate capacity for new development. And with regard to policy number 15, that the majority of the development with a density greater than 2 units per acre shall occur within the cities of San Juan, Hollister, and Piscinas Ranch, this board has very recently approved 2 projects, Sunnyside Estates and Santana Ranch, which propose 1,300 units within the sphere of influence of the city of Hollister. So it would be very difficult to establish substantial evidence that the 21 units in this particular project violate the majority requirement in Land Use Policy Number 15. There's no evidence that the design and improvements associated with this subdivision would cause serious public health problems. The only finding in the resolution that would lend one to believe that is the finding that, quote, in the event of problems with the well or pipeline due to the sole source of water, the proposed subdivision is subject to the potential loss of water for essential human water needs. The only evidence in the record of the potential water loss due to well failure is the testimony of the neighbor, who indicated, without substantial evidence in support of, or objective evidence in support of, that a couple of the neighboring wells went dry and that there have been discontinuances of service to the Tres Pinos Water District system due to the failure of a well. The only subjective evidence in the record is the fact that is the Water District's own engineer who reports that there have been three interruptions in service, two of which have been caused by power failures to the electrical panel, and one of which was a pump failure. So there is no evidence within the last 10 years, despite the testimony of a neighbor, that the sole source well presents a concern for human safety. There's also no evidence that the discharge of waste from the proposed subdivision into an existing community sewer system will result in a violation of existing requirements. The key here is that there has to be a finding that this project will result in a violation of waste discharge requirements promulgated by the Central Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board. As is evidenced by the Waste Discharge Order number R3 2012-15, the district is already in noncompliance of those standards. This project, there is no evidence showing that this project will cause a violation of those standards. In fact, the evidence in the record shows that this project will improve those discharges, as the project applicant has proposed a reverse osmosis system between the sole source water well and the delivery to the houses. Cleaner water in, cleaner water out. That's precisely what San Benito County Water District, Sunny Slope, and the City of Hollister are doing with their less salt plants in the new project off Union Road. Furthermore, the violations of these waste discharge requirements are cited by the Central Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board as increases in, they primarily deal with salt and TDS. The salt issue is primarily related to domestic use of water softening devices, and the TDS is a community problem common to the San Juan Valley groundwater subbasin of the Gilroy-Hollister groundwater basin, and those are direct quotes from the waste discharge order. There is no evidence in the record that this project is going to cause a violation of waste discharge requirements. Both staff and county's consultant, Rincon, have recognized that Tres Pinos Water District is either already in violation or potentially in violation for total dissolved solids and salts, and there is no findings that this project would cause a violation in and of itself. There is a proposed finding in the draft resolution of a significant effect on the environment. Here, for the first time in 2.5 years, the board is proposing to make a finding that this project requires an EIR. That flies in the face of staff's conclusion in the initial study, Rincon's conclusion in the initial study and the proposed mitigated negative declaration, and the Planning Commission's findings. There is no evidence of a substantial environmental impact. I'm going to quote directly from the initial study, dated June 10th, 2015. The proposed mitigated negative declaration finds that the project will not have a significant effect on the environment. And I'm going to quote from the December 16th Planning Commission staff report. Based on its evaluation of the comments received for the project and all of the evidence in the record, there is no substantial evidence that the project would have a potentially significant impact on the water supply, wastewater, school facilities, or traffic impacts. And finally, there's no evidence in the record to support the claim that the project improperly defers mitigation. The standards for improper deferral of mitigation were set by Clover Valley Foundation versus City of Rockland. Impermissible deferral of mitigation measures occur when an environmental document puts off analysis or orders a report without either setting standards or demonstrating how the impact can be mitigated. When for practical reasons mitigation measures cannot be fully formulated at the time of project approval, the lead agency may commit itself to devising them at a later time, provided the measures are required to satisfy specific performance criteria. The condition of approval at issue deals with the condition of approval that the project applicant connect to the wastewater and water treatment system, wastewater treatment and water system for the Tres Pinos Water District prior to approval of a final map. I question whether or not today's decision is a final approval of the project, but nonetheless, this the effects of this project specifically detail the condition of the conditions with which the condition of approval will mitigate, and that is water and wastewater supply for the project. By connecting to the system, the project will have access to water and wastewater treatment. There is no unlawful deferral of mitigation. There's no evidence that the environmental document puts off analysis. It's in the initial study and mitigated negative declaration. There's capacity for both. The applicant simply needs to apply to connect. And both of those findings are made by staff and RINCON in the initial study and the proposed mitigated negative declaration. The problematic part of your decision here today is that for the past 2.5 years, staff has made various findings and conclusions that will be contradicted by the board's decision this afternoon. I appreciate the consideration of our request for a continuance, and I appreciate the opportunity to address you here today. I request that you please deny the appeal and uphold the Planning Commission's well-thought, well-rounded, well-supported approval of this project based on the substantial evidence in the record. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ravala. Does the appellant wish to provide any comments?
Thank you very much. I'm here today on behalf of Tres Pinos Water District to urge you to adopt the proposed resolution before you. As I previously stated, this resolution doesn't identify one deficiency in the project. It identifies many deficiencies in this project. And notwithstanding various communications from the developer, this project needs to be evaluated on its merits, not on anything that happened 10 years ago in relationship to a previous proposal that might have been in front of a previous board. Initially, I'd like to point out that back in 2013, before this project was even submitted, staff advised the applicant that if their sole source of water and wastewater treatment was going to be the Tres Pinos Water District and circumstances had not changed in any significant way, staff would not be able to recommend approval of the project prior to this project even being submitted. So 3 years ago now, that was the case. And things haven't changed. We've gone over the situation. The district recognizes that the moratorium is long past due. We're taking very serious and substantial steps to address that. But it doesn't take away from the findings that are before you today. And that is, this project doesn't comply with either the current or the former general plan. And while I recognize the authority cited by the developer in support of the position that a project merely needs to be in harmony with the general plan, I would cite specifically to the former general plan before you in this resolution, where a utility service district is proposed to be used for a new development, evidence shall be provided prior to project approval. That said district has adequate capacity for the new development. If a district requires expansion, the design, construction, maintenance, standards, and financial mechanism to support the improvements shall be resolved prior to project approval. So this provision doesn't request harmony, it mandates certain things be done. And as has previously been presented to this board, those requirements simply cannot be met as we sit here today. This resolution before you cites a lack of redundancy, a lack of capacity, a lack of storage, and non-compliant effluent levels. Those were all supported by evidence in the form of San Benito Engineering's report and the Wallace Group's report. This project needs to be vetted on its merits. We've presented information to you, as has the developer. There's a resolution before you for your consideration that summarizes the merits and deficiencies of this project, and we would urge you to adopt the resolution before you today in light of all of the evidence that has been presented to you at now at least 3 hearings on this matter. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Breen. At this time, I'll hold the comments from our board, and I invite members of the public who wish to speak on this matter to step forward. Mr. Richmond.
Marty Richmond from Hollister. The discussions about this have gone way beyond the limits of a project. And so the previous speaker talked about the lack of storage and lack of capacity and lack of this and lack of that. I'd like to talk about the lack of seriousness here. It worries me as a taxpayer here to have the board and members of this staff talk about where Tres Pinos Water District is or isn't, and show no seriousness about bringing them up, forcing them to fix their problem. So what am I going to do? Am I going to get stuck with the bill as part of the county when their water district fails? Am I going to have to pay to haul the water out there? Am I going to pay to haul the water away or the waste away? You know, when the sewer failed in Hollister, they came up with a way to handle it. They put it in tanks, you'll remember that, and they haul it away for years because that's what's got to be done. So I'm very concerned as a taxpayer, and I've mentioned this before, this is not the first time I've talked about this, is that I don't believe, you'll excuse me, I have 26 years, there's 26 years of records to show why I should not have any faith in the San Tres Pinos Water District. And to have their representative come up here and say, well, yes, we kind of goofed it for 26 years, doesn't change anything. So I would ask this board, if they're serious, no matter what happens with this project, if they're serious, to put down a set of rules to force the water district to take care of their problem. Because I don't want to wind up with the bill. And I don't think the rest of the people who pay a substantial water bill and a substantial sewer bill in the city of Hollister and the rest of this county want to wind up with this bill. Which means, and I'm going to take your seriousness whether you force them to comply and force them to bring their system up to standard, force them to declare an emergency, force them to charge a water bill that covers the ground. We're paying more for water everywhere else. They got a big water problem. That's funny. They're paying the lowest rates in the area. They got a big sewer problem. That's funny. They're paying the lowest rates in the area. You know, I'm tired of hearing it because they don't want to fix it. The truth is, I believe they don't want to fix it. And as long as you're going to give them that back door to get out of fixing it, they're never going to fix it. So maybe they ought to be dissolved, and maybe they ought to have to pay to put the sewer line into the sewer plant. That's my thought, no matter what happens on this project. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Marty. Points well taken. Any other member of the public wish to provide comments? Feel free to come forward. See none, I will close the public hearing. We can close it. All right. And I'll bring it back to the board for any final comments. I know that we all had comments at the previous hearing, so if anyone wants to add more. If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I have a couple of comments.
Supervisor Barrios.
Thank you. I want to say that the Tres Pinos Water District has a history of 25-plus years now of doing absolutely nothing. Their closed-door policy, to me, is very disturbing and unacceptable, especially when clearly offers have been made to improve the Tres Pinos Water District. They have been denied. They have been turned away. I vote to deny the appeal. That's going to be my position. And I request that this board receive regular updates on the plan that Tres Pinos Water District seems so inclined to have and move forward on. And it is our duty, I believe, that we stay on top of this issue. So I would like to request that those are regular updates. Let us know where they're at and if they really are serious about moving forward on improving their system. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Supervisor. I think your point's well taken. I'll look to our county council. As far as, staying on top of the water district, what can and can't we do? And, is it something where we would create kind of like a ad hoc, a committee and kind of reach out to the Tres Pinos Water District? I mean, what would you recommend?
Well, the Tres Pinos Water District, as far as I know, and I must confess I have limited knowledge of it, is a duly organized district, so it's its own independent body. Again, I don't know the exact situation. My understanding is there is a vacancy on the... No? Has that been filled? Okay. Because I was going to say, the one thing the board can do is if there was a vacancy, it can step in and fill the vacancy at some point. But that sounds like that has been corrected. So, I don't know that the board now being up to a quorum, having the 5 members and operating, I'm not sure what the board's jurisdiction is over it, and we'd have to look into that a little bit deeper. But I don't know that the board can just unilaterally dissolve them because they don't like what's happening out there.
That's right,
Mr. Chair.
Right. And that's what I had expected to hear. So whether we as a board want to move forward with some kind of committee, maybe through intergovernmental, I don't know. Supervisor Muenzer?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is, did this board request monthly updates from the city of Hollister when they were going through their sewer issues?
That is a city, Mr. Chair. The city of Hollister is a city.
But they're duly elected, just like the Tres Pinos Water Board is duly elected. Have we requested updates of the Pacheco Water District? I know they don't have sewer, but they have water, and they are having issues. Have we requested updates from them? Do we have a history of requesting updates when other elected body have issues? I don't think so. So I'm not quite sure why we would have grounds to request update on this situation.
Supervisor Botelho?
Yeah, I want to agree with Supervisor Muenzer on this. We have a lot of water districts. I'm upset with the San Benito County Water District on different issues. And if we're to tie up our staff time watching over a duly elected body, we're in deep trouble. We have enough issues and problems to resolve. And, through the application and the process that we have, CEQA, I'm upset that this didn't go through an EIR. It really should have. And we have people that are saying one thing and another set of folks saying another on environmental impacts. And this appeal is just based on water and sewer service. And I have the most experience on this board serving on a planning commission and going through a split. When a district says no, a no serve, that means project is over, done, until they're able to get a secured water and sewer service. It's done. And to do anything other than that, you want to pay for the bill as for the public speaker for us to approve this project, and all of a sudden that well goes out. We have 22 homes that, well, heck, we got water. You've got a service. We're sticking our nose into a special district that was formed to provide that service for themselves. And if it's the lowest water rate, so that's the voters down there to decide in how they run that district. In San Juan Bautista, they have 3 wells, and they've had problems with 2 of them, and off and on with all 3 of them. And I'm very, very concerned about the redundancy of the system. The applicant came in with the most houses he could possibly shove on that piece of property, which exacerbates any issues that district has. And for that matter, we've gotten in trouble with inadequate environmental work before on that property and cost the taxpayers of this county a lot of money already. So I can't support this today. I'm going to support the appeal. And it's, and the day that the water issue is solved in Tres Pinos, and the issue is between the applicant and the water district, not the county and the water district.
Thank you, Supervisor. Are there any other comments, Supervisor?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Matt, so from a legality perspective, responsibility to taxpayers, there's no relationship, right, between San Benito County and the water district, correct?
Well, right at the moment, I don't think the Board of Supervisors has any oversight capacity over the Tres Pinos Water District. There are some situations where the board can step in and take control. That does not appear to be present here right at the moment. The issue, as Supervisor Botelho said, appears to be between the applicant and the water district, and also between the water district and the state of California and the United States of America that is trying to regulate it to bring it into compliance with the various Clean Water Acts or whatever else it is. So that's who really has the oversight of the district. Why the state of California, why the United States government has let the situation drag on for 26 years, I have no idea. But you people probably know as well as I do about how government works, and we can look at the San Justo Reservoir where nothing has happened year after year after year. I mean, it's government. I don't know the specifics there, but the regulatory agency that should be coming in and threatening Tres Pinos Water District with sanctions or fines or shutting it down is the state of California or the United States government, not the county of San Benito.
Right, and if I could add to anything, my whole my concern about this project is, for me, it just doesn't make sense at this time. When you talk about water issues that we've had at Stonegate and the money that we've had to allocate to those residents out there, this is a project that, in my opinion, is on a very fine line. And certainly, there's issues at the Tres Pinos Water District, but whether we agree or not with the general plan that was updated, that is an area that was identified as having a study area. So this is certainly something that's not going to go away. We're going to have additional projects that are going to be slated and planned in Tres Pinos, and so the eyes of San Benito are on our little water district. And although we may not have the oversight, the arm or the capacity to push the Tres Pinos Water District along, we certainly, I'm open to hopefully establishing a cooperative relationship with them and reaching out and seeing what we can do to help them, and then obviously maybe reaching out to our representatives in the Assembly and the Senate to see if there is, something that we can help at the state level, help the Tres Pinos Water District. But this is certainly something that's going to, it's going to continue to happen because, as I said, you look at our brand new general plan. There's a huge study area in that area, and so we're going to have more interest in Tres Pinos, whether we like it or not.
Mr. Chair, just one
De La Cruz.
one quick question. I guess this is more a question for the board and for Ray. If, per general plan, there's going to be other applications coming in, and then Tres Pinos is going to offer a no service letter, and then continue to come appeal to the board, moving forward 3-4 years, does that mean that the county is going to have to do financial contributions or financial investments if the water district says, you know what, we don't have the financial means to do it, we need the county support? At that time, are we going to intervene and say we're going to give financial consideration?
I think that's an interesting point. But I think that is a discussion for another time, should it occur, But it is quite possible.
Because, I feel like this is an opportunity to avoid that down the road where hopefully there's some kind of cooperation that can happen and not say no to every application that comes in before Tres Pinos.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Barrios?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to make something absolutely clear that for me, this is not about the project. I don't want to say I don't care about the project, but it isn't about the project. For me, it's more about the principle and the way that it was carried out. And, but maybe we're not based on principle, I don't know. But and the only reason I recommend it, not to have a hold on the Tres Pinos Water District, but more to inform the public. When they have their meetings, the public really cannot, it's not live streamed. They don't really get updates. It would be nice to be able to do it at this venue, and people can know what's going on. Are they really, doing what they are committing to doing? Not so that we can be, regulating them, because I know, but obviously we have some say. After all, it's being appealed at our level. So at some point, these appeals are going to continue as if they do nothing. So that was the intent for me. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ray?
I was just going to kind of go along with what Supervisor De La Cruz was requesting. In the unincorporated area, I think we could probably speak to a little bit more. The Dow Webb project is a great project that we can kind of use as a case study where they came in and helping to link the sewage plant into their environment. They're putting money forward to advance the project. So, eventually probably looking at larger projects, maybe having them actually funnel some money in to address water, to address the sewer, but obviously those are special cases.
Thank you, Ray. So where's Botelho?
Well, it just comes back to, when we were doing the general plan, we approved some areas that I consider, in my experience, not having sufficient resources to support a high level of density of urban housing type of arrangement. And whether it's rental areas, Santana, the one you're
Stonegate?
what's it? Yeah, Stonegate. We put in a well that produces 50 gallons a minute, which is not adequate for that size of development. And now we're putting more houses down there. The point I'm trying to make is that we have to be real careful where these developments go in, and maybe it's sufficient for an X number of homes, but we can't create this water resource. And if you recall, when we were looking into options for Stonegate, the Sunny Slope Water District didn't want to go in that direction for one reason or another. And all they had to do was run a line, a few hundred yards, and they're in that development. And they chose not to help us. So that tells you something as well. We just don't know enough to allow this to go forward, and to have it set up the way the Planning Commission had it is the opposite of what it should be, because that puts us in play to provide those services.
Hey, Supervisor. Are there any other comments by members of the board? So at this time, I'll entertain a motion.
Thank Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would make a motion, but I need clarification from probably Barbara, maybe? The staff recommendation is, it says, it uses the word continue the public hearing.
Yes, this was, you've already done that. That was continued from the last January
okay.
date. So that's done.
Okay,
and
so
then,
I just want, that's a clarification.
Right.
So we don't need to have.
No.
So,
it just be with motion to adopt resolution granting the appeal.
okay,
Resolution 2016-11.
okay, so moved.
Second.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can I clarify from the clerk? This is being adopted before the other resolutions, possibly this morning. Will the number stay the same?
I would go with the previous one that we had for 2016-9.
Okay, so 2016-9?
Okay,
Okay.
so moved.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion passes 3-2. Okay, so moving to item 20 on the regular agenda. It's an item that's coming out of our county administrative office. Mr. Espinosa?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, this item, your board actually received some information about this at our last board meeting. Today on the agenda, we're going to go ahead and read and have a first reading and a motion to accept an introduction, waive further reading of the ordinance, and continue the matter to March 8th, 2016 for adoption of the proposed ordinance making changes to sections 3.05, 148, 3.05, 149, 3.05.153, and 3.05.154 of Article 8, Chapter 3.05 of Title 3 of San Benito County Code. So we have here Sarah to elaborate further on this particular item. Sarah?
Thank you. So I will explain some of the changes and read the title of the ordinance for the record, and then ask for the motion. So in summary, the changes before you are to remove the sections that included the youth commissioners, as we discussed at the last meeting in concept. It would also change the quorum from 5 to 4. And additionally, it would change the meetings from monthly to quarterly, with the opportunity for more meetings to be held at the discretion of the chair. That last item has been brought to the Parks Commission, and they agreed to go forward with at least quarterly meetings. So with that, I will read the record, the ordinance title. An ordinance amending Chapter 3.05 of Title 3 of the San Benito County Code to modify the membership of the San Benito County Parks and Recreation Commission and reduce the number of commissioners required for a quorum. So your motion would be to accept the introduction, waive further reading, and continue to March 8th for adoption.
Okay, are there any questions from members of the board? Yep. Any questions from members of the public? See none. I will ask for a motion.
Move to staff recommendation.
Second?
Okay, there's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Moving on to item number 22. This is from the County Administrative Office. It's the reactivation of the County Finance Ad Hoc the committee, including authorizing the board chair to appoint 2 board members as representatives. And I am going to go ahead and appoint Supervisors Botelho and De La Cruz. Okay?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if that's a thank you, but
I'll tell you.
you're very welcome.
It's 6 months.
You're very welcome. Okay, so with that item done, I don't think it requires any action from the board. We'll move on to item 23, Human Resources. Ms. Cochran, is that going to come out of our CAO's office?
That's correct. We're going to go ahead and present this, and we're inviting Barbara Thompson up to elaborate further on this particular item. This item is to move forward with finalizing the Resource Management Agency. As you're aware, we actually come before your board last year and did a lot of work with that. We need to tidy that up, as we mentioned at our last meetings when we were discussing this particular item. So with that being said, we're moving forward to propose the ordinance. as well as a motion to make a motion to accept the introduction and waive further reading and continue this matter to March 8th. But we do have Barbara here to elaborate any further concerning this item. Barbara?
Throughout the county code, there's numerous references to the planning department, the Old Public Works Department, and integrated waste. Rather than going through the complete code and changing each place that those references occur, what we've done is made one section that has a definition section, which is probably the fastest and easiest way to make those changes to the county code so that the code is consistent. Now, there's going to be additional factors that still need to come back before the board. We still need to probably change all the job descriptions to reference the new titles of the supervisors, et cetera. So this is still going to be a work in progress, but this is one step further to actually consolidate in the county code those three departments into a resource management agency. So I'm going to read the title of the ordinance for the record. It's an ordinance amending Chapter 3.01 of Title 3 of the San Benito County Code to finalize the reorganization of the Planning, Public Works, and Integrated Waste Departments into a new resource management agency. Does the board have any questions?
Are there any questions, members of the board? Okay, none. At this time, I will open it to members of the public. Seeing none, I'll bring it back. Is there a motion? I'll entertain a motion.
So moved, Mr. Chair, as recommended.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you.
Mr. Barnes, Resource Management Agency Director, for item 24.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Afternoon. Sorry.
Good afternoon.
Feels like morning still. Actually, this is probably should jointly be titled Resource Management Agency and Human Resources. This is a proposal to create a capital program manager position within the agency, a new classification, upgrading, if you will, the capital projects manager position. Essentially an architect, a super architect with project management skills to move along some of the big construction projects that we have going on, the jail, the fire station, potentially the library projects, and so on. And we anticipate that this person would be instrumental in preparing and executing a facilities master plan and the capital improvement program for the county. I don't have a formal presentation beyond that, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Barnes. Are there any questions from members of the board?
Yeah, I
Supervisor
just
Botelho?
have, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have one question, I guess, off the top of my head. In the past, I know when we've had larger projects, we contracted out for a project manager to oversee the construction components. Would this person be qualified to do that? Is that what you have in mind?
Absolutely, yes. Yes,
So
and that, I'm sorry to interrupt.
So potentially, monies that we would be allocating for these projects could be coming back to that position.
Yes, for something very large, I would expect that we would probably still contract out just because of the time commitment. Construction management might be a full-time job, for example, and that would take away from all the other things that the county staff would do. But certainly for the bulk of projects, yes.
So probably the jail project, we would still contract that out?
There would be at least a component in the contractual arrangement for construction management, but this person would oversee, not be redundant, but oversee that effort and peer review it to make sure everything was staying on track and look out specifically for the county's interest there.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Fire station.
Yeah, and I left off the list the homeless shelter, the proposed homeless shelter. This person would oversee the construction of that and those sorts of things.
All right.
At this time, I'll open up to members of the public who wish to provide comment. See none, I'll bring it back to the board and entertain a motion.
Move to approve, Mr. Chair, per staff recommendation.
Second.
Okay, there's a first and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. So then we'll move to item 25. Again, Resource Management Agency, Mr. Barnes, receive an update on the general plan implementation.
Yes, sir. Very, very briefly, in the interest of time, one of the things I want to point out to you is that mea culpa, the staff staff report that's in the board packet was incomplete. At some point in the agenda preparation process, I tried to update it, and apparently it didn't happen. So just before we broke for lunch, or at the time we broke for lunch, I put on your table the full staff report. You obviously will not have had time to read that, but it's I'll go over it fairly quickly for you, and just sort of tell you where we are. And I expect that this will be at least a monthly, perhaps more frequently, ongoing report as we move through various projects. As you know, Mr. Chairman, the ad hoc committee met in late January and talked about priorities for general plan implementation. The last 2 pages of the staff report are actually the little matrix that the ad hoc committee and the planning commission now have looked at and thought about in terms of implementation activities. It's not intended to be an exhaustive list by any means, but it was stimulus for thought. And from that perspective, it worked out quite well, I think. The ad hoc committee recommended that the top 3 priorities be economic development, affordable housing, and CEQA guidelines updates. And so those things are discussed in a bit more detail in this staff report. You're all well aware of the housing situation in the county. We're building about 90% of our housing stock as single-family detached homes. I did a very, very informal survey of new construction for sale, that is 2015, 2016 construction dates, for sale now, built in the county as opposed to Hollister or San Juan Bautista. And I discovered that the average home price is about $725,000, $726,000. The homes are averaging 2,500 square feet, and they are 4 bedrooms and 2.6 baths on average. We are building homes, as you well know, for Silicon Valley workers. So our housing strategy is, we do a pretty good job with the homeless and the residentially challenged. I think it was the word that was used this morning by the gentleman. And then there's a huge gap between there and $725,000, $750,000 homes. We need to figure out how to fill in that gap, and that's what the affordable housing strategy will be about, that we bring to you, develop and bring to you over the next several months. The price that a median worker, I think that's right, the price that a median wage worker in San Benito County can afford, the house price, is about $340,000, $342,000. So our workers can afford, with $145,000 of cash money for a down payment, a house that's about half of what we're actually building today. That would, in terms of square foot cost, that's about 1,100, 1,200 square feet, the size of a good 1-bedroom or perhaps a small 2-bedroom apartment or condominium. We don't have any of those. We need to figure out how to build those. The other point I want to make about housing is the impact on the community of those Silicon Valley workers. And again, we're all well aware of this. There's congestion, wear and tear on infrastructure, greenhouse gas emissions, loss of family and business time that could otherwise be productively used here in the county, loss of wages. It's called leakage. Residents go out of county to go to Trader Joe's or Costco or wherever and spend their money on their lunchtime, and they don't spend it here. So we lose the advantage of all of those wages by those workers being exporting every day to another county. So our housing strategy is probably not really a housing strategy at all, except to change our codes to encourage smaller, attached, stacked, townhouse, other kinds of developments. And we can look to other communities around. For example, Morgan Hill has a variety of a little bit higher density things that are smaller in size and more affordable. It's a good place to start. But our housing strategy involves building services and retail businesses, encouraging those to be here so that residents don't feel like they have to be shop out of the county. They can come after work and spend their money here. It involves some form of an inclusionary housing program, an affordable housing program. Our voluntary program, as you well know, is not working very well at this point. And it involves, in particular, senior housing. Senior housing is imperative so that folks who age in place in this community can remain here, feel at home, feel comfortable, and continue to spend money, be consumers in San Benito County. Second part of the report talks about economic development. And again, these are closely related. You'll remember my periodic table. All of these things work together. There's a recent report from AMBAG on the population growth, the growth forecasts for the three-county area. And the interesting thing for me out of that was that all of the job growth is going to coastal areas, Monterey, Watsonville, Salinas, Santa Cruz in particular. And all of the housing is going to inland counties. The primary issue, I'm sure you'll be shocked to learn, is water. There's not water availability in the coastal counties. And so we are under extra pressure to build that housing here. We need to flip that conversation, work cooperatively with the other counties and try and figure out how to share in all of that. But that's obviously a tough, long-term sort of solution. Economic development is not an easy thing to take on, as we all know. It's going to be very complex and take a lot of partners and small projects and small wins. And as we go through and add up small wins, we'll begin to realize that we have created an economic development program that's sustainable. We look to you for leadership and staff for expertise and the consultant community for impact fee analysis and those sorts of things, and we'll have a more detailed report on that later. CEQA guidelines, I just want to point out that there are several areas in the county's CEQA guidelines that are going to require updating. These are something that touches on virtually every code, every ordinance, every regulation in the county in one way or another. There are technical changes to maintain consistency with the county administrative and procedural activities. We just created an RMA. The CEQA guidelines don't refer anywhere to the RMA, obviously. There are changes necessary to maintain concurrence and consistency with state and federal laws. Ours are woefully out of date. We'll need to update things like categorical exemptions so that they align with the state guidelines particularly. And then, of course, there's new changes that have appeared in the general plan, and so we'll need to make the county CEQA guidelines align more closely with the general plan itself. The last thing I would bring to you is to urge you to work closely with the Planning Commission, who has a very intense interest in general plan implementation and a lot of boots on the ground, if you will, experience with individual projects. Questions?
Supervisor Muenzer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You led right into my question. With the general plan update, because it went sideways, it ended up at this level. And I guess I need a refresher course on Planning 101. Is the implementation of the general plan, is the bulk of the work usually done with the Planning Commission and then brought to us? And this is all due respect to the chair and to the ad hoc committee that you created. Are we duplicating work by having this ad hoc committee? Does it work need to be done at the Planning Commission level and then brought to us?
Typically, I'm sorry, we through with the
yes,
okay.
Yes,
typically, the bulk of the work would be done by the Planning Commission. I would expect that the ad hoc committee and the board would continue to give us policy guidance and make sure that we stay between the curbs, if you will, in a policy direction that we want to go. There are a lot of different issues that are involved. They all work together. There's no human being on earth can keep all of that in their head or even on a sheet of paper. And so it's going to require all of us to sort of think collectively about how this rolls out. But
And
The commission has a lot of expertise.
Right, and I appreciate the comments, and I think the perfect example, what this ad hoc, the committee was intended to do was to really go off of the idea that Mr. Barnes had last year when he had said, hey, we have this new general plan, let's look for ways to start the implementation process. So I thought that this could be a transparent way to be a part of that process as a board. And certainly I think at the retreat when we had that discussion on planning, we had 5 different supervisors that said, that we had those different priorities. And we have to keep in mind that the Planning Commission is advisory. And although we respect the work that they do, I think what's extremely important is that this board set priorities, and then let's send them to the Planning Commission to work out those priorities for us, because we'll see them eventually. But I think we need to really to direct our staff through Mr. Barnes, and he could, give the work to the Planning Commission, obviously. But if we want to prioritize affordable housing and be number one, I don't want the Planning Commission bringing to us, hey, we think that the number one thing is that you need to address level of service. I think that priority needs to come from the board, and that certainly will give the Planning Commission all the discretion they need to make sure that they bring to us a quality change of policy or a new policy if we're talking about affordable housing. That was my intention, was to create this transparent process, especially for our board, and to keep staff accountable and make sure that we are working through these issues. Supervisor?
Mr. Chair, thank you. I appreciate those comments. Let me add my 2 cents to the HADA committee, or to you, or to the Planning Commission. We just experienced a heated discussion earlier today. I don't know if it's far-fetched asking this request to the committee or to you or to the Planning Commission, is to come back to the board and tell us which lands are going to be subject to the Tres Pinos Water District. I'd rather know now than as the applications come in. So then we know, okay, maybe we need to change the color of the general plan then. Because now Tres Pinos is saying no to anybody that comes in, because they have to be consistent. There's no way they can be inconsistent and say, well, we don't like Johnny, therefore we're going to vote no, but we like this person, we're going to vote yes. We as the board need to be blind about it on a project and be consistent to that area. Mr. Chair.
That's fair.
Thank you.
Supervisor Botelho.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point, Supervisor De La Cruz. It could be the Tres Pinos Water District. Tomorrow will be the Aromas Water District with the west side of the county. It could be a methyl bromide plant on Highway 25. And or here in Hollister, we have an annexation agreement that is, in jeopardy as we speak, that we have problems. And, I am really, really concerned about the speed of growth and development in our county, to the point that I'm a little bit dismayed in the fact that we don't have our affordable housing program moving in the direction that I thought we had arranged for. It was not a voluntary program. It was a mandatory program with flexibility incorporated in it. And somehow the staff of that time misinterpreted this board's direction. That needs to be straightened out before we approve not one more development. I don't understand what is the criteria of the environmental review process, whether full-blown EIR should be done for 100-unit developments or over, or is it at 500, or what have you. I think we have to be consistent in that requirement, and I don't think we are. The development agreement, none of us on this board has any idea what type of development triggers that effort. And we all come out with 5 different messages. The piecemeal development of some of these community study areas is a huge, huge problem. And we're experiencing that at the Enterprise Road, South Side Road, Hospital Road area. We have 3 or 4 developers kind of going in all different directions, and none of it is, and just as the director of RMA stated, it's people that are driving out, out of 25 and taking their money with them. we've kind of heard some of the concerns from the mayor of Hollister on some of these issues, and I hate to give too much credence to it, but he's probably right, and to the point where I'm really, really concerned. And just what we heard this afternoon, there's a special district that could have been the San Bernardino County Water District for all that goes. They said no serve, and we're in a position that we have to make a determination, right, wrong, or indifferent. And we have unhappy people. I think we have to somehow get our act together, and quite rapidly, so we could continue to move forward and provide the housing that all levels of income in our county could enjoy, and that will spur the economic development and job creation that we would hope for.
Thanks, Sir Botelho. Supervisor
Thank you,
Barrios.
Mr. Chair. I know that Supervisor Botelho and I years ago worked on the, we weren't calling it affordable housing anymore, but it was affordable housing by design. And I thought that we had done this, Brent, through development agreements, where we would say, okay, you can build your project, but we're going to require that you build so many units that are smaller, more affordable. So now you have, but unfortunately what we didn't do is we didn't ask for these units up front. They're not going to be done possibly until the whole project is completed. And then at the very tail end, so now you've got 5 years of no affordable housing. Right. So I think that's a mistake that we have made, and I think we need to consider that keeping the plan would be a good idea, because those units are smaller. They're better for single people, for smaller families, for elderly. But to insist somehow through that agreement that they get done up front. I'm sorry, Mr. Developer, you're saying you can't afford it. They can't afford it. They have the means to borrow the money, build them, and then continue the project with the bigger homes at the tail end. Right. So I think we haven't gone astray. We just haven't put it in the right place in the agreement. So, and then the other point that I want to make is implementation is quite extensive work. Mm-hmm. Brent, I don't know that you're going to be able to do all of this in-house with just staff. I doubt it very much. Right. I thought that we were still in contract with our consultant, the general plan consultant.
Yes, we are.
That maybe we can take advantage of that with maybe a lower fee, a lower rate, because we are still under contract, and move forward in getting some of this implementation done.
Yes,
with that help.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Chair, but we will be bringing back to you in March an amendment to that contract, and we will talk either as a part of that agenda item or an additional agenda item about potentially contracting for implementation services.
Good. Okay.
And what we might want to do, Brent, is I know that this is from our retreat, we had discussed a special meeting just on planning. Yeah. And so maybe at that meeting,
we could do that, absolutely.
That item.
At the board's convenience, absolutely.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. In reference to the affordable housing building for our residents, it seems like as of right now we're actually building for not our residents, and you said it earlier.
That's right.
On that same note, we need to ensure that we start addressing all the income levels. We all said it. I mean, I'm not going to say it again. We all said it, and making sure that also we spread it out to the entire community, because in my district on the west side of Hollister, there's already projects already of low-income housing being built out there, and I consistently hear from my constituents saying, we don't want another ghetto being built out there. We want to make sure that the housings are built, but not one after another, after another, right. after another.
Right.
So when we take that concept into consideration, making sure that the entire county is fair game.
Mm-hmm. The example that I've used a couple of times now is I think it's Oak Creek neighborhood, where there's a small area within the subdivision that is affordable units, differently designed, and there are affordable units that are indistinguishable from the rest of the housing stock scattered throughout the community. That would be ideal, and absolutely scattered throughout the county, the community, because different folks have different needs. They want to live in different areas and so on. It should be indistinguishable and not create barrios or ghettos or whatever that have a stigma attached to them.
Are there any other questions from members of the board? I'll open up to the public. Any comments from members of the public?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Brent.
Marty Richard from Hollister. First of all, if you live in Cupertino, this is affordable housing.
Very affordable.
So it's all relative. And the folks that are here who are, quote, taking their money out of the county, by the way, everybody who buys from Amazon is, quote, taking their money out of the county. So they got to live somewhere. The real problem is that Santa Clara County is never going to give us any money. They are the economic engine. Our people and other counties around are the fuel. And those roads are the fuel lines that go between the fuel and the economic engine to feed that engine. But they're never going to give us a dime to keep that fuel line into well done. I'm going to disagree with my good friend, Mr. Botelho, who it won't be the San Benito County Water District, and it won't be the Hollister Water District, and it won't be the Sunny Slope Water District that are going to say no without reason, because we know if they do it, it will be professionally determined that it's in everybody's best interest. I don't feel the same way about the Tres Pinos Water District, in case you haven't noticed. Anyway, the problem with the housing is not the developer, and so I'm going to defend developers. And yeah, we're building too much housing right now. But I'm going to defend developers because that Santana, when was that Santana Ranch approved?
2010.
Okay, so that Santana Ranch was approved 5.5 years ago or 6 years ago. And the problem is that all the houses in it are coming at once. But because the way we work it here is we approve a development, somebody sits and roosts on that development for 10 years until the demand curve gets to be where they can sell them all, and they build them all. We need to put in a system that basically meets our growth objectives on a timeline, which means the growth has to happen during the low demand portions and the high demand portions. So that would give us a growth that looks like this or this, whatever the angle is, rather than like this, okay? And that is our problem, because when it goes like this, you never can get caught up on infrastructure, and you can never predict when you need that infrastructure. And I wrote a big article on it. Maybe you'll find it somewhere on Benito Link about how we should do that. And I think we've overgrown, but I don't think the total is we went years with nothing. And now all of a sudden we're years with everything. And you know what? We're going to continue to do it as long as we say, oh, yeah, here's a development for 500 homes. Start building whatever you want and build them whatever rate you want. So I will wrap up by just saying we need to throttle that, not necessarily close the spigot, because if we close it, when you open it again, you're going to get flooded, and then you close it again, you're going to starve. So we've got to do something, and that's hard to do, but we should do it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Marty. Any other comments from the public? Okay. So I don't think that this item requires any action. So we will go on to our next item. You guys want to take a break first, or you want to just go ahead?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Let's take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and hit our last item.
Just walked out and I thought, oh.
baseball is pretty standard, Matt. You pay half your games within your division. Yeah, half your games, and then 1/10 outside the National League, in the American League. Yeah.
All right, we're going to move on to our final item of the afternoon or of the day, which is item 26. I'll turn it over to our CAO so he can introduce the item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we have our Renee Sloan Holtzman Sakai. We have Allison Hawk here. She's going to go ahead and open and present the item to your board, and then after that, we're going to go ahead and hand it off to the elected officials.
Thank
Allison?
you, Ray. Thank you. Good afternoon, your board. I'm here today on behalf of actually Danya Torres Wong, who is a partner with my firm that has been working with staff and the electeds for a few months on this item. So she was not able to be here today, so I'm here in her place. So we just wanted to open with talking to you about process to explain to you why we're before you today in open session. Typically, as you know, under the Brown Act, you're able to discuss labor negotiations in closed session, and then the item is presented to you in open session as soon as there's an agreement between both parties, or if it hits impasse and it goes to imposition or implementation. This is a bit different with your elected officials. They are not regulated under the Myers-Milius-Brown Act. There's no requirement to negotiate with them. Therefore, there's no Brown Act exception to have the negotiations discussed in closed session. So as part of the process for determining compensation and benefits for your elected officials, it's done in open session deliberations. So that's just by way of process. Please let me know if you have any questions. And that's why it's here before you today. So a few months ago, your board gave direction to staff to provide the same, very similar benefit construction that you have with your other units. And that is the maintenance of a fixed dollar amount for your health care benefits, that flat rate contribution that the county is providing for your other represented employees, as well as capping the county's healthcare contribution at 70% for those retirees when they hit retiree Medicare eligibility age. And then also providing enabling language so that the county, if it so chooses, can exit CalPERS and have a different healthcare option after receiving input from the county insurance committee that we've created this year with the other unions that you have here. And then also the final decision would then come from the board. And then to begin to pay the full 7% of the employee contribution for CalPERS. So with that, the county presented this to the elected officials. Danya and Ray have been in discussions with them over the course of the past few months, and I believe now the elected department heads would like to speak with you regarding their request.
I'd say good morning, but I think it's good afternoon now, or even good evening. If I'm repetitive to what, I'm going to mispronounce your last name, Ms. Hauk said, I apologize. As your board is aware, the agreements for the MEG, SEIU, confidential management, unrepresented employees, and appointed department heads has been concluded. While these bargaining groups are allowed to bring their proposals to the board behind closed doors, we, the electeds, are not. And as Ms. Hawk just said, as mandated by law, all discussions concerning salary and compensations with the board must be held in open and public forum, which brings us all here today. The items before you concern the request by the board that the elected department heads agree to the following provisions. And again, most of these have already been touched upon. First, the department heads agree to the maintenance of the fixed dollar county health care contribution amount. Second, we agree to capping the county's health care contribution at 70% of the regular county contributions for retirees 65 years or older You also requested that we agree to provide enabling language for the county to exit CalPERS healthcare beginning in 2017, based upon input from the County Insurance Committee and a final decision from your board. Fourth, that the elected department heads begin to pay the full 7% of salary for CalPERS retirement. And as you are aware, currently the elected department heads are not bound to make these payments. And fifth, and finally, that the elected department heads agree to not request any retroactive roll-in to base pay of auto allowance as directed by board resolution beginning in 2008. This represents a savings of $30,000 to this county. I would also remind the board that over the past 5 years, over the last 5 years, the county coped with budget shortfalls caused by the Great Recession. Before any other bargaining groups, us elected department heads were first to step forward. And we gave up compensation and benefits to the tune of over $200,000. In fact, in previous years, as much as 10% in salary compensation has been reduced voluntarily by us elected department heads. Your board has been consistent and unwavering in its desire to provide all county employees equitable compensation and benefits. With this goal in mind, but taking into consideration the unique status of us elected department head officials, the request before your board is that you consider providing the elected department heads similar wages, hours, benefits, and terms, and conditions of employment as granted to the county's appointed department heads, as well as other bargaining groups in the county. The granting of comparable benefits and terms of conditions of employment to the elected department heads is not without precedent. The results of the informal survey of 20 counties conducted between March 2015 and January 2016 by the elected department heads provides a glimpse into the varying benefits provided to elected department heads by counties. This survey was included in your board packet. Many counties offer lucrative retirement plans for all their classic employees. For example, Sonoma County provides its miscellaneous employees with a 3% at 60 plan. Solano, a 2.7% at 55. And Santa Clara County, a 2.5 at 55, with it being based on the highest 1 year of compensation. A total of 15 of the 20 counties surveyed give some level of longevity pay as a percentage of base pay to their respective elected department heads. 5 of those counties provide longevity based on terms of office. 6 counties provide some level of employer-paid deferred compensation benefits into a 457 plan or a 401A plan. Additionally, counties provide administrative, vacation, or sick leave accrual hours amongst the many benefits afforded to elected department heads, which, as your board is very aware, means that in these counties, the elected department heads retire with large leave payouts, just like regular employees do here in this county. Given the cost of these lucrative and varied benefits, our proposal is significantly smaller, I guarantee you. So, to be consistent with the appointed department heads and other groups, we, the elected department heads, are proposing these comparable benefits. First, the one-time payout of $2,536 to help cover the increases in health care costs this year, as granted to those groups that have concluded negotiations. Second, up to 50 hours of in lieu of leave cash out for 2016 only, again, as similarly granted to those groups that have concluded negotiations. Third, a 2% COLA beginning in October, as granted to those groups that have concluded negotiations. Fourth, in December, an in lieu of administrative leave cash out equivalent to 40 hours, a long-standing additional compensation granted to the appointed department heads and other management groups. And fifth, longevity compensation as recently similarly granted to appointed department heads and is similarly granted as a long-standing additional compensation to other groups. With this request for benefits and compensation is while this request for benefits and compensation is substantially the same granted to appointment department heads, the elected department heads are not requesting vacation or sick leave compensation as granted to all other county employees. The proposed longevity compensation is slightly different because it is based on terms of office to reflect the nature of our elective status, the unique nature of our status. Terms versus years of service approach to longevity is not unique to our county as evidenced by the survey of counties. For example, in Shasta County, longevity pay is provided at a rate of 4% every 4-year term served and 5% after 5 terms have been served. And in Placer County, which provides compensation steps to their electeds, 5% longevity pay is granted during the second term of office. Sierra County, which provides compensation steps to their electeds, also provides its electeds 10% longevity compensation after 5 years of service. In our request, 2.5 if granted when the second term of office begins. It's 2.5 if granted when the second term of office begins, and then we'll cap at 7.5. This is the same cap as the county's appointed department heads and other represented groups. We believe that longevity compensation based on terms is appropriate for other reasons as well. We believe that longevity compensation based on terms is appropriate, I'm repeating myself, for other reasons as well. Aside from being common practice in other counties, longevity based on terms addresses a long-term structural salary compaction issue in the sheriff's office. Longevity compensation incentivizes better succession of our elective positions, as replacement for our positions may require looking beyond our county borders to find the best counties, as many counties like Sonoma and San Joaquin have recently experienced to fill the office of auditor-controller. This means that recruited out-of-county employees, as well as recently hired county employees that are qualified to run for the professional elective offices, are incentivized, at least in this small way, with the promise of comparable compensation to make the difficult decision to run for public office. In terms of cost, the overall effect of the proposal, excluding the one-time cost of the 2536 and the 15 lieu of leave hours, is only 1% increase after the 2% COLA is accounted for. What that means, or on the flip side, that proposal calls for a 1% cost savings in overall ongoing costs until the October COLA becomes effective. We believe that our request is negligible in terms of increased costs. We also believe that the proposal is essentially 95% the same as granted the rest of our county's employees that have completed negotiations. Above all, we feel that this proposal is reasonable and equitable. We were the first to assist in lean years, and now we are among the last to address comparable benefits given to others. The 5 elected department heads are here to answer any specific questions you may have.
At this time, thanks for that presentation. At this time, are there any questions from members of this board? Supervisor Botelho?
Yeah, I'll
kick it off.
It almost kind of feels like being in a Shark Tank. We're feeding on ourselves. The longevity pay is going to be the new thing. I think we might discuss other items of the proposal. But wait, I understand this. Some of you have been in office longer than others, and this is really the first time since I've been on the board that I've had to kind of face 5 elected leaders like this. But are you proposing the longevity for instance, for Tom, be 7.5% retroactive when we come to this agreement, or is it to your next term?
No, it's moving forward, not retroactive.
Oh, okay.
None of this is retroactive.
All right, great. I appreciate that. That was the question I had.
But your previous years of service will be counted. Meaning it's not retroactive in the form of dollars, but it's retroactive in the sense that if you've served 2 terms, at this next term you won't get 2.5%, you'll get the 5% or 7%.
Yes, I'll get the 7.5%.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions?
I guess my question would be more not to, and besides, you guys, this is pretty even. It's 5 to 5. 5 there, 5 here.
But one of them carries a gun.
That is true. But I guess my question would be to staff. I know that there are some long-term savings here, and to me that's huge because that, I believe, equates to huge savings for the county in future years. Do we have any dollar amount connected to that? Maybe Melinda would have those dollars.
Melinda she has some numbers with her.
Careful, Linda.
We'll move
Careful.
back.
Careful. They might bite you. Careful.
And I think what I'm getting to is that it's important for the community to know that whatever direction we go, that we can show some sort of but the savings to the county if we opt to go this way.
Yeah,
There will be cost, but there will also be some savings. And
Right. I think this, the savings certainly is noted. Oh,
Okay.
Is you going to talk?
So I did an estimated cost, which I think is in your packet.
I saw that.
And so I think what you're seeing as a savings is that the PERS, they're picking up their PERS would equate to approximately $45,000 a year. And then I put the cost of each of the different items that they were asking for, kind of in the top section of the cost proposals that I provided.
Okay, but the PERS part of it would be about approximately $45,000 per year.
Per year.
Okay, Melinda, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
No problem. And I appreciate everything that was said during the presentation. I do take issue with the 7% PERS. I know that in the staff report it talks about how the elected department heads, they're not a formal bargaining unit, and they're currently not obligated under law to give that 7%. Well, neither were we, but we did. We're public servants, and so we felt it was necessary. We gave that up years ago when we first were asked to do it. I do take issue with that. The other issue I take, this is a unique process. We drag our other our bargaining units through the coals, SCIU, MEG, DSA. These are protracted battles that we have with them, and we come out black and blue on both sides. It's a give and take process, and unfortunately, in my opinion, this isn't a give and take process. And so, it's, having just seen this and having been provided with the documentations, I'm not ready to make a decision on this because it seems like it's a take it or leave it. So at this point, I'm kind of at the leave it phase because I believe that there needs to be a little give and take. Because I don't agree with a lot that's in here, but that's how I feel. My board colleagues could feel a different way. So, are there any other comments?
I'll wait till the public.
Okay. At this time, I'll open up for public comment. Mr. Richmond.
Marty Richard from Hollister. As a person sitting in the audience, and this has nothing to do with my personal view, I didn't take it as a take it or leave it. I took it as a fact that it has to be done in public. So you make an offer, they make a counter offer. It has to be done in public. Therefore, nobody's going to sit here and do the black and blue, as you called it, because it's done a different way. I didn't take it as a take it or leave it. I don't think anybody said that. And they certainly didn't get the impression from the tone of voice that was used that it was a take it or leave it. So I just want to say that as a neutral person on this. Look, I'm always looking to save some money. If it was up to me, they'd have to pay me to work here, okay? But they don't want to pay me to work here. And you know that. But I rarely come up and talk about compensation directly. I talk about when I think you've made a big mistake, like the health care thing, I come up and talk about it all the time. But you don't find me up here, trying to knock somebody's pay down or lift somebody's pay up. But I do look at the value I get. And I've looked at the value that we're getting in San Benito County from our key people, and these are the key people. They have the keys to the castle. They're the reason not everyone calls you up at 4 o'clock in the morning when there's a problem. And they're the reason that things get done with skeletal staff, and that's all we have here. Just to let you know, I took a look at the 12 counties. I put that, if you have that chart, I put it together because I did it for a different reason, actually several weeks ago. In 2014, 12 counties that have from half our population to twice our population. There's 12 counties. And how much they spent per capita on costs for wages and benefits of their full-time employees. We're at the bottom. We're at $518. The average is $762, and the only real rich county in the list is Mendocino. The rest of them are just normal counties: Lake County, Tehama County, Tuolumne County. That's all. So those are counties with populations from 30,000 to 98,000, and we're right in the middle. If we, and the reason we're only paying $762 an average is because it's not low pay. Our average pay is good. It's skeletal staff. We have a very thin staff. I'm not thin, but the staff is thin. Okay, which means the key people have to work harder and have to make better decisions to be able to run things on that staff. If we had to pay the average, I figured it out, it would cost us more than $14 million more in wages and benefits if we paid $762. Not the top. The top is Mendocino, pays $934. And we serve a lot more people than most of them per employee. And I'll wrap up by saying we serve 113 people with every employee, so we don't have very many employees. I think the top was 125, but 10 of the counties are below us. And the only reason to do it is because the key people can run their shops like that. So, if you got a good key person, you got a good colonel, as we used to say in the Army, the generals can get killed, the war goes on. If you got a good colonel, you can keep operating. These are your colonels. They run the ship, they got the keys to the kingdom, and their experience, talking about longevity, experience is really valuable from everything from remembering the mistakes we made not to do them again, to getting the vote counting machines operating in the middle of the night, okay? And we've been down all those roads. So I think you should take that in consideration. I think their counteroffer is reasonable. I'm sure you're going to negotiate it, and there'll be ups and downs, but I think it's in the ballpark. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Marty. Are there any other members of the public who wish to provide comments? Come forward.
Good afternoon. My name is Kimberly Groff. I'm an eligibility worker for the County of San Benito. One of my coworkers was actually supposed to be here, but she was unable to make it, so I'm here in her stead. I'm also a member of the local SEIU 521, and we just wanted to express our disapproval on agenda item 26 regarding providing of additional compensation and benefits of elected department heads. We're outraged to see that this proposal will be considered by the Board of Supervisors at a time where the county is continuing to lose frontline employees who've had to suffer through increased health care costs and low wages. There are several key distinctions between elected department heads and appointed department heads that make this proposal shameful and short-sighted. Unlike appointed department heads, elected department heads do not serve at the will of the Board of Supervisors and are not accountable to the Board of Supervisors for the quality of their work or supervision of their departments. Further, these elected department heads are in no position to collectively bargain with the County Board of Supervisors, and the Board of Supervisors has no obligation to engage in negotiation with them over wages and benefits and the like. Consideration of this proposal is a slap in the face of our SEIU 521. Represented county workers who are among the lowest paid employees in the county who had to suffer having what should have been a much needed relief towards wages instead go to mitigating the increased health care costs. We are continuing to see turnover and loss of employee retention because the county has not been able to provide competitive wages to its frontline employees. It is outrageous that these officials are requesting the same $2,536 bonus that our employees negotiated. There actually wasn't a bonus, but to help offset the cost of the increased health care. And the health care costs are absolutely unaffordable to our employees. And we're wondering if it's not just a case of, oh, me too, we want some of that. To see the county give away the few resources it has in the service of elected department heads who are here to serve the public, not themselves, would be a disservice to our county employees, a further attack on employee morale, and a further sign that the county's priorities are out of sync with the needs of the community. Elected department heads are here to serve the public, not to line their pockets. We urge the board to be transparent on the costs of such a proposal, specifically to cost out the proposal for 1 year and its compounded costs over the next 2 to 3 years, and report back at the next Board of Supervisors meeting the costs in order to provide full transparency to the public. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Mr. Chair. Ma'am?
Supervisor Muenzer?
Ma'am, can you read that last sentence again?
I'm sorry, the last sentence?
Maybe the last two sentences.
That we, let's see, to be transparent on the cost of the proposal, we would like to see the cost of the proposal for year, and then for the next 2 to 3 years, what the cost versus the benefits and things would be to the county itself, and to report back that at the next meeting, or the costs in order to provide the full transparency to the public, so the public has access to that information as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, thank you, Supervisor. Are there any other members of the public who wish to provide comment on this item?
Rob Bernowski, Ridgemark. I wasn't expecting to speak today, but since the topic came up, I feel compelled to. I've lived in the community 22 years, and I've gotten to see how this county has evolved over then, especially the level of government services that we receive from a customer service point of view. And I have to say, in the past, we'll call it 5 years, there's been a remarkable difference in the level of customer service we get from most of the individuals here. And I say that because one of them I don't interact with very often. But if you remember the controversy that was just constantly in our newspaper over the previous district attorney, for example, the current district attorney, there's no controversy of any great magnitude that I read about. It appears that she does her job, does it very well, and is what we would expect. We don't want to read about her in the newspaper too much. When I think about the response that we got from the Sheriff's Department years ago versus what we get now, it is remarkably improved because of the fine management that the current incumbent carries. The elections office under Mr. Gonzalez, I mean, it is again, it's remarkable. And I interact with a lot of elections department in my current capacity in my political life. And the level of customer service and the improvement in the systems, it is a dream come true for somebody in my current capacity. The assessor's office, I went in there once and I needed a copy of something and they gave it to me, so it was great. But I do remember that these folks were the first in line to help the county out when it was hitting its fiscal bottom. And I don't know how it's going to work out with the negotiations, but they certainly deserve the attention that they're asking now, and to be compensated according to their level of competence. In my opinion, they certainly have earned it. And I want to add, I'm not speaking for my wife, who is a superintendent of a rural school district here, but I will tell you about our conversations we have at the dinner table sometimes, because her school interacts with the Sheriff's Department quite a bit in that capacity. And the level of service they give Spring Grove School in North County Joint Union School District and the District Attorney's Office with the body, SARB, that handles things like truancies and stuff like that, it is top notch. And from the Bernowski family, I'm telling you, there has been vast improvement here, and like any other entity, when there is an improvement in performance, you do improve their pay. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob, for those comments. Any other members of the public wish to speak on this item? See none. I think Joan is long gone. So I'll bring it back to the board for the discussion, for a motion.
Mr. Chair,
Correction.
What?
can I say?
Supervisor De La Cruz.
Thank you. I've been very consistent on this, and I hope I don't get in violation of closed session items we discussed. But I've been very supportive of being fair to all our employees, including the electeds, and that is the $2,500. I've been very strong supporter of that to everyone who has played ball with us. I'm consistent with that. I'm also been very consistent with the 2% that we give our employees, and I think those is about the only two things in relationships to the electeds, because they do not get a salary per se. They get more of an elected salary. It's hard to explain it. They're not regular employees; they're elected officials. So that's about the only two things that I'm actually going to willing to compromise with you guys is the $2,500 and the 2%, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Muenzer. Or Botelho?
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay. I think Mr. Brunowski brought out some very valid points, and as I mentioned at the retreat, I'm really concerned about a couple areas with our organizational structure, and I think we're starting to move in the right direction as far as adding staff and trying to find also management level people in all of these departments. But it starts at the top too. You got to pay the department heads enough money to keep them in office and keep them motivated to work here in San Benito County. And I think that's very true what Ms. Rob said. You guys have done an outstanding job. We've been very fortunate. And I'm not sure when was the last time we've addressed salary increases for elected heads. I
believe it was 2008, I believe.
So it's been a while, like the rest of us, really, and the rest of the county. I certainly support Supervisor De La Cruz's 2% and the bonus, but the longevity might be the kind of an added incentive of keeping people in office. It is a job. I don't think any of you go out play golf on Thursday morning, and it seems like it's a full-time position. But if I was to do the longevity, it would not be retroactive in any means. It would be, after the first term, perhaps.
Future term.
Pardon me?
Future term?
Future terms, yeah. When your election comes up, I don't know what the election cycle is for anybody here. I'm up this year, and maybe I'll get a longevity of 2.5%. But I don't think so. That's all right. But you guys certainly, the 50-hour vacation cash out is kind of a concern for me. I'm not sure how that should work. But, those other items, and, I certainly hope that the board considers that, because we do have to maintain qualified staff, and one of these days you guys retire, and like Tom, you took over for Arnold, and it has to have some attractiveness for somebody in your office to kind of move up through the, or your organizational structure, and hopefully someday become the assessor, or somebody from the outside want to run. And so that's kind of part of it too that we got to look at, whether they're appointed department heads or elected.
Supervisor Muenzer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And my thoughts are all over the place, but I want to start with saying I too appreciate all the work that you guys do. And to address the comments from the SEIU member and their letter, it is the mandate for this board to look over the county purse strings. And just as we had to deal with the grand jury last year and their budget and make hard decisions, we have to make hard decisions, in this instance also. I'm reminded a very famous actor in his either late 20s or early 30s received a Lifetime Achievement Award from some organization. And I laughed to myself, how can somebody that young receive a Lifetime Achievement Award? Usually is given for a lifetime of achievement. And I'm having trouble with this longevity after one term. I don't think it's appropriate. And I'm hoping, contrary to what the chair said, that this is not a take it or leave it, but that we can continue to negotiate. I know we have to do this in open session, which doesn't make it easy, but as of right now, I would make the motion to continue this, let this go back to staff and U5, and see if some, we can do some more negotiations and come up with something that the five of us and the five of you can all live with.
Supervisor Barrios?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know that I respect what the person from SEIU had to say, that there is a distinction between the appointed and the elected, that the appointed or that the elected are not accountable to the Board of Supervisors. Worse than that, they're accountable to the entire county, because if the entire county doesn't want to re-elect them, they lose their jobs in 4 years. They either get fired, or they get hired again. So every year they have to ask for their position back. So that makes it, to me, a little tougher. I do want to know if their insurance rates went up like everybody else. Did they suffer the same kind of cost that the rest of us experienced?
Who's they, if you mind?
The elected.
With regards to the insurance?
Yes.
Yeah.
So they were adjusted.
Same as everyone else.
It's the same as everybody else. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So if I'm hearing everybody, what the concern is, the longevity, that it isn't retro, is that what I'm hearing? And that you're willing to come back after?
I think so. So what I've heard thus far is issues with longevity. I myself have issues with longevity, not the policy per se. I think it's just the mechanics, right? I think it's effective 2016 moving forward. Unfortunately wouldn't take your years of service, but moving forward, I would be okay with that. I think that's one of the issues, right, for the longevity issue. Longevity for you, Supervisor? You didn't mention anything on longevity? You're not in favor of it? Okay.
I would recommend that maybe, I think Jerry's Supervisor needs to talk.
We have a microphone, please. Thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate it. I would also then pull back my position and recommend what Supervisor Muenzer is saying is take it back and have further discussion. That might be a better option.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, I think one of the reasons we're kind of in this fix is because previous boards in almost all agencies made decisions that had long-term effects. Now this 2% or 2.5% after the first term is not going to affect anyone standing before us, but it will have effect down the road. And I'm not quite sure that's the right message to send, that longevity is earned after only 4 years of service. And it could be the very wrong message to be sent to the rest of our rank and file. Right. And that's what I have a lot of issues with. Right. And so I just think all this needs to be kind of worked out a little bit more.
And so what's difficult is we have to do this in public. And so I'll look to our staff to see how, obviously it depends on what our elected, our department heads want to do. But as far as moving forward, what would be most helpful for staff?
Well, Mr. Chair, if I may. So I think what you were referring to in your comment is when you look at the staff report under motion, it actually defines the motion as presented today in the staff report. And then it basically states here that alternatively the board has the option to take no action at the present time or provide other direction to staff. So I think ultimately that no action part, if again the electeds want to keep it as the motion stands, I think really we need to hear from the elected department heads right now.
Yeah, and that's why I had made, no offense to anybody, that's why I had read the way I read it is we either voted up or down.
Right.
And I'm not sure if there's wiggle room with the elected department heads.
Well, I think through the chair that the electeds are here to because we just spent 3 months. Sorry, we just spent 3 months. And many hours of talking with administration and Danya Torres, the representative of the board. This is kind of as close as we ever came. So I don't think that sending it back to staff will provide any sort of a resolution without there being very clear direction from the board.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and if the board is not...
Would it be appropriate to appoint a subcommittee of 2 members of this board to work with the department heads?
Yeah.
I think it would be appropriate.
Yeah. Is the board open to that?
That would be a better idea than just sending it back to staff.
Yeah, because that's, does that work with
that,
staff?
That works with us. We actually have discussed that a few times, and I think that would definitely help and at least kind of give some direction. It sounds to me right now that most of the motion at hand is palatable. I think it's the longevity aspect of it that we probably need to address. But I think having the ad hoc, discussing this some more with the electeds, and then bringing it back to the board, I think would be the best action.
So I think whoever you select with the ad hoc, just so that there's clarification for whoever is that committee of the proposal. Is there anything else that kind of stands out rather than the longevity? Is the 50-hour vacation payout? It's one time, I think.
If I can interject, the longevity, it was amazing when we did the survey. We didn't think any elected officials received longevity. And when we got through with the survey, 15 counties, more smaller to mid-sized counties, received longevity. And, it's not uncommon. It's a very common thing.
Yeah, and I was happy that you included it in the presentation this afternoon. And personally, I'm along with the chair. It's just a matter of the mechanics of it, and that's what we didn't really see in the staff report. And personally, I'm not worried about that. I think that could be worked out in a little bit detail.
Well, in fact, truly, longevity was the only issue that we had with staff. It boiled down to that one. There was no issue with any of the other items. So the staff recommendation was that longevity be presented to the board exactly in the exact same language as the appointed department heads, and which is 20 years of service, 25 and 30 years, 2.5, 2.5, and 2.5. And but we felt, because of our elective status, that it would be more appropriate to present it with terms. But as if that was staff recommendation, and if that's the only item of that the board has disagreement with, I think if we would like to. As part of our concessions, that we would agree to that language, I think. Because, 5 elected is like herding 5 cats. It's very difficult to do. That's why this conversation took so long to get to this point. But one of the caveats, and I think there were some staff members who were in agreement with that caveat, is that some recognition for prior public service be accounted for in that in that language, and that was kind of the main issue we had with that language, because truly the appointed department heads just in December received the longevity as part of their pay, but yet the too bad part of it is that not a single department head was able to take advantage of any of the longevity, because I think the closest department head we have to that is at 15 years, and so it's highly unusual for an appointed department head to be taking advantage of any of that longevity pay. So in a sense, it's a unattainable carrot that's for the appointeds, and that's why for at least the electeds, we were looking at something a little bit more reasonable and more attainable. And so if the board would entertain the idea of sticking with that language that the appointed department heads were granted, and with some recognition to prior years of public service. The reason why we're bringing that in is because, for example, our assistant CAO, she came from a different county, I think 2 different counties, where she built up her resume of experience and her job knowledge, but yet it's not really accounted for in our longevity plan, and it kind of I think that's where it landed, as far as our discussions, and I think that if the board is amenable to the idea of discussing that, if that's the issue, because if that's the one issue that the board has an issue with, I think we could talk about it right now.
So, Mr. Chair, for clarity, Joe Paul, you're saying that remove the longevity as it relates to terms and instead use the appointed language that is years of service.
Yes, that's right.
But use prior years that have accumulated to compensate for those.
And that's not unusual. There are many counties that include prior public service to be counted towards longevity. Sonoma County is one of them that comes to mind immediately.
So that's my question then, is then we would remove the longevity as it relates to terms and give it the language that we use for appointed. Is that what you're saying? Kind of.
Mr. Chair, if I may?
Yes.
So I think I would recommend to the board that I think we should still discuss this in more detail, because there could be some caveats and some misunderstanding. And one would be years of service. Is that in the private sector or in the public sector? Is it county, city-based? I think we really would probably really need to define that and present that if this is something that the wishes of the elected official. I hear what they're saying and I understand that, but I also think that we probably need to sit back and do some homework and really define it and then present it to the entire board.
Okay.
I don't know.
Right. I think what might be easier is if we do create an ad hoc a committee, and then we will meet with our department heads and then bring back something to the board and then the board could, look at that, and if we needed, additional revisions, and, if there's, then we could go back to the department heads. But I think that would probably be the easiest because, we could stay here all evening to talk about each of these items. One, but that's what we do in closed session.
Right.
But I think if we, I think we're really close to an agreement, but we just have to kind of iron out some of these details, and we could bring it back to the board prior to adoption just to see if everyone's okay with it. If that's okay with the board.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll go ahead and appoint myself and Supervisor Barrios to that committee.
Mr. Chair, would we be presenting a recommendation at the next board meeting, which would be March the 8th, I believe?
I think that's up to to staff, right?
Yeah, Madam Chair.
Is that doable, or?
Mr. Chair, yes. I think we'll have to look at the calendaring because dates already have been posted. So
at least by March, then maybe our second meeting in March?
Second meeting in March for sure, yeah. If we can get it on, we can get it on, but I think we're running late already for 8th.
Okay.
Just because we're trying to do all the meetings a week in advance, so that way they get published to the public as well as the board a week and a day before, so that we need a little bit more time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Okay. So that's the direction we'll take. With ad hoc, we'll work with Ray, and we'll get something scheduled. So that concludes our meeting, and we're going to make some change for the adjournment. We learned this afternoon of the passing of Joe Horwittle, who was our former interim resource. He helped us create this resource management agency that we rely on so much here. He was a great member of our county family, and he's certainly going to be missed. Our condolences, our thoughts, and our prayers are obviously with his family and all those that worked with him here at the county. So if we could take a couple minutes of silence, and we will adjourn in memory of Joe. And so with that, I'll accept a motion for adjournment.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
A second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And we'll adjourn to March 8th, 2016.